Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo. With your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you, as always, to everybody out there for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I appreciate you all very, very much. This is our Thursday episode. Tomorrow, I'm going to be at Imperial Pizza doing a show with John Scott, new sports director at WGRZ TV. So look for that on Friday. As for today, I'm joined by my good buddy, a recurring guest now at this point, PK from the Buffalo Sports Collective. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
Not bad, not bad. I got a really bad sunburned 2 weekends ago, so I might be peeling a little still up top here because I don't got any hair. But it was real bad because I was outside without a hat for probably like 6 hours. Stupid mistake.
I'm trying to think how long ago it was. 2 weeks ago, where it was really, really hot out.
Yeah, it was that time. Yeah.
I've been able to avoid any sunburn. Now, to be fair, there has not been a lot of sunburn opportunities so far in Buffalo. I mean, we're still in June. We still got all July and August to get to. I'm sure they'll come. Well, that sucks. That's what happens when you're a man without a lot of hair on top of your head, my guy.
Yeah, I think I was out there doing landscaping for 6 hours, and my wife turned to me like 5 hours in. She goes, "You haven't been wearing a hat this whole time, and you just mentioned this now. Like, this is going to be real painful in the morning." And yeah, it was. I was like a tomato on the top of the head. It was bad. It was bad.
Of course, PK, like I said, is one half of Buffalo Sports Collective, an outstanding Buffalo sports podcast, primarily covering, of course, the Buffalo Bandits. Today we're going to do pretty much, well, for at least half the episode anyway, we're going to do nothing unique in terms of title, buy or sell, but this is going to be mostly Buffalo sports related. I'm going to throw some topics at you, some statements, and you're going to tell me if you're buying it or if you're selling it. And then we'll kind of have a little bit of a conversation about that. We'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. Before that, though, all right, I got to make sure that I'm really clear on this. We're recording this episode Wednesday around dinner time-ish. So it's around supper time on Wednesday. As of right now, as we speak, Jeff Skinner is still Buffalo Sabre. Okay? There have been lots of buzz and lots of reports that a buyout is likely. Earlier on Wednesday, Chad DeDominicis from Expected Buffalo cited, and he said he's not breaking any news, but he did cite multiple sources that said the Sabres are going to buy out Jeff Skinner, barring an unforeseen trade. So by the time people watch this, either late Thursday night or sometime in the Thursday, this might already be old news. Jeff Skinner might already be officially bought out, or maybe not. We don't know. But as we're recording this, Jeff Skinner is a Buffalo Sabre. So before we get into some Bills and Sabres, buy or sell stuff, let's talk about Jeff Skinner here for a second. If the Sabres do indeed buy him out, or if they have bought him out, they'll be paying for 6 years. I believe the total is 2/3 of his salary, but they will be saving $7.5 million against the cap this season, which, again, without Jeff Skinner, the Sabres would have roughly $31 million in cap space right now. We'll talk about Kevin Adams as well in a few minutes. But let's start with Jeff here right now. What are your thoughts about this apparently becoming not just a reality, but seemingly a foregone conclusion at this point? The Sabres are going to buy out Jeff Skinner, it seems. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this has kind of been hinted at for a while now. And even when they had that press conference, what was it, a week or two ago, he didn't come out and deny it. And I think that was a big indictment of, this is a realistic possibility. And everybody that's been reporting that is top notch. And who are we to discredit any of that kind of stuff that's they're putting out there, because they're usually spot on. I've been really skeptical on buyouts in hockey for a long time, because while they help you in the now, they're going to cost you money on the cap when they typically wouldn't. And I think you pointed out last time I was on here. Not only is it going to save the Sabres some money, especially in year one, like you said, $7.5 million. Mm-hmm. It's also going to open up a spot for one of these younger players. And I think that's one of the big reasons they're doing it. I don't think they're doing it to save money because they've got $21 million in cap space already. And I don't think they're anywhere near ready to be paying to the top end of the salary cap. But I think they're more doing this to open up a spot on the roster for one of these young players or possibly somebody they bring in. So I'm not against them buying him out, but they better spend some of this money. Otherwise, it's a waste to do it. They could have just done it next year and saved a little bit less, and it would hurt them less for years to come.
Sure. I think there's a multitude of factors, I think, that ultimately have led to this, not necessarily going in order of importance. One of them would be, I think anyway, let me know if you agree, I think the emergence of J.J. Peterka, showing that he could play on that first line late last season with Tage Thompson and with Alex Tuch. I think that's a big reason because Jeff Skinner, I mean, you don't need to be a hockey analyst or a guru to know this much. Jeff Skinner can put the puck in the net. More on that in a second. But if Jeff Skinner is not putting the puck in the net, if Jeff Skinner is not playing on a top six line, Jeff Skinner is, for the most part, useless at that point. So we'll talk about that second line in a second. But Tage, Tuch, Peterka, do you feel like the emergence of J.J. Peterka, that maybe the confidence that the organization sees in him right now, is playing a significant role in Skinner probably getting bought out here?
I agree because he was one of the shining stars of the team last year where there really wasn't any. He took that big step that I think a lot of us were hoping we would see, but a lot of us were expecting to see that from the Jack Quinns of the world until he got hurt. So JJ got all the focus and he was the one that stepped up. I think him emerging as one of those go-to goal scorers definitely influenced this decision. I think their love for Yuri Kulik down in the Rochesters, I believe that also does it. You got Matt Savoy coming up as well. But I am one of those ones that I loved seeing Peterka on the top line, but I would love to see that kid line on the number 2 line once again. I think he's going to flash the most, and it's going to help Dylan Cousins and Jack Quinn the most being on that line. I think doing this is freeing up a spot on that top line, and I'm hoping that they use this salary cap and this 11 overall pick coming up on Friday to go acquire somebody that they can pair with Tage and Tuch on that top line, and then keep the Peterka, Cousins, Quinn line together that jives so well 2 years ago.
Nice little teaser there, by the way, because one of the buy or sell topics is going to be the 11th pick that the Sabres currently hold here in the draft on Friday night. Sure. And look, Zach Benson is very much in the mix now to be on maybe that second line with Cousins and with Jack Quinn as well. So I would say J.J. Peterka emerging, definitely a reason. Look, his salary, definitely a reason. I mean, you're talking about $9 million for a guy who, I don't want to say his skills ever eroded because I certainly don't think that's the case either. But again, if he's not going to be a top 6 guy, why pay him? And how much do you think Lindy Ruff becoming a head coach of this hockey team? A guy who, look, we don't know how Lindy's going to do, but what we do know is he's going to hold some people accountable in that locker room, which I think you and I would agree this team lacked badly under Granato.
Yeah, I think the Lindy aspect plays a bit of a factor there, but what you exactly said, the accountability aspect of the locker room is going to be massive. Even Kyle Post saying in his few words coming out when he went to Florida, pretty much indicted the team that they lack leadership skills in that locker room. But yeah, the $9 million doesn't help. I don't think he ever played up to the $9 million, even his best year 2 years ago. I don't think he was a $9 million player, but I think the Kruger years definitely made that contract look so much worse than it actually was. I think he was more of a $6 to $7 million player rather than a 9. And I can only blame the player so much. If somebody's going to hand me $9 million for 8 years, I'm going to sign it. But yeah, I think that the money, the JJ Peterka coming out of it, and then the budding prospects that you got in Rochester that you need to make room for are a lot of the, not in that order, like you said, but I think that those are a lot of the reasons why Jeff Skinner could be on the outs, and it's at least seeming like he is on the outs.
Yeah, and we'll I want to circle back to Jeff again one final time here in a minute, but let's just have a little bit of fun with the fours because we're about to get into what is going to be an incredibly interesting and obviously vital offseason for the Sabres as well. But let's just, for the sake of discussion, let's just assume that Paterka's on that top line, and let's just again say Zach Benson, Quinn, and Dylan Cousins. There's your top six for now. Okay, that bottom six, you're going to include Greenway. He's a lock. And if Peyton Krebs doesn't get traded, if he's not part of a deal, I think that's a lock. Gergensen being back doesn't seem likely. I'm trying to think in my mind, like how many bottom six spots do you have open right now? And there potentially could be two or even three. So there's some work. You traded Casey Middlestat. You're buying out Skinner. There's going to be a lot of work to be done when it comes to the Sabres. What do you call them? Bottom six, third line center, maybe a second line center, and Cousins third line center. That's interchangeable. But you know what I'm saying? With like that bottom 6-4 line, seems like there's lots of opportunity for young guys, but also some outside the organization work to be done from Kevin Adams.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you want to go with the top six, like you just framed it, you're looking at 4 to 5 spots on that bottom six that you're looking to fill. And the biggest issue with that is everything that Kevin Adams has said that he wants to be harder to play against on those bottom six. I don't know if you're going to be able to squeeze in one of those Rochester prospects in that bottom six role, because I don't know if that is the role for those type of players. They're more of those, goal scoring players. They're more of the players that you want inside the top six. So I think a lot of the bottom six could be coming from outside of the organization, whether it be free agency, whether it be trades. And you mentioned Gergensen. My God, if I'm him, with all the success of former Sabres, why would you want to come back here? I know they talked about how much they love him in the room and how vital he is to the organization and how beloved he is. But you're looking at that. Why wouldn't you want to go play some playoff hockey? He's the prime example of a perfect player that would play on a bottom six on a playoff team that you would hate to play against. Go to Colorado, go to Tampa Bay, go to Toronto. Go somewhere else, because then you're almost guaranteed to play a playoff game, which you've never seen in your entire career.
I think he's gone. And I was just scanning the Sabres current roster just to make sure I didn't forget about anybody. Maybe Eric Robinson could be in the mix. Yeah. I see Kulik being up. I see that being a guy for sure. I don't know about Kulik and Savoy at the same time, because then you're getting really, really young.
Yeah.
I don't know. But like in terms of, all right, so Jeff Skinner, right? Let's put a bow potentially likely on his career. 6 years with the Sabres, 427 games, 153 goals, 291 points. By the way, those 153 goals, only 5 less than Pat LaFontaine had. Seems kind of wild to throw that stat out there, but it's true. I mean, he had that 40-goal season, which, by the way, that 40-goal season he parlayed into 8 years and $72 million. He had a 33-goal season. He had a 35-goal season. The guys put up some numbers, especially when Kruger wasn't the head coach. It's not like some bum, some scrub that the Sabres are buying out right now. They can't get out of that contract fast enough. I kind of feel like this might have been maybe not such an easy decision because, again, he puts the puck in the net. Good numbers here.
Yeah, especially on 5-on-5. I think he's never been a power play guy. 5-on-5 has been his role, and he's excelled at it minus the Kruger years. But I think his time here is going to be looked upon very differently depending on who is looking at it. I think it was, I'm not calling it a failure, but it was not what we were expecting when they signed him to that 8-year deal. And I personally, I've been a fan of Jeff Skinner. I don't think his role on this team was maximized as much as it needed to be because of it's on a smaller extent. It's similar to the Jack Eichel, where they just failed to build around him. And while he excelled on that top line, you failed their bottom six and you couldn't get over the hump, or you didn't have a goalie that could get you over the hump 2 years ago, or your entire power play disappeared last year. So I think his time here will be remembered because he's gone so long into his career, over 1,000 games without making the playoffs. And I think he'll be almost the poster child for a bit of this playoff drought, because of, his failures to make the playoffs even before coming to Buffalo. He's getting a little bit of the short of the end of the stick, but also his play on the ice doesn't really, for those that love hitting and love back checking and love defensive play, he's not that type of player. And I think we've known that for a long time. He's one of those weird players that will be remembered differently depending on who's looking at his play.
One underrated aspect of his game is his ability to kind of be a rat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like other teams, they didn't get voted like one of the most punchable faces or something like that. I just thought of this in real time because I'm brilliant, dude, and I just think of things in real time. I thought of a Buffalo Bills comparison for Jeff Skinner. Maybe I'm wrong. And if so, you let me know, or if you're watching or listening, you let me know as well. I thought of Aaron Schobel. Let me explain a little bit. Drought era, neither guy's won shit. Pretty good players. Not great players, but pretty good players. Pretty good numbers, but not outstanding numbers. Made plays, but never really moved the needle in terms of team success. Made money, never played in the playoffs. I'm getting those Aaron Schobel. Aaron Schobel's a good defensive end. But when you look back at him, you look at a guy who was all right. That's what you're kind of like most Bills fans, I'd say their recollection of him was, yeah, he's all right. And his team sucked. Kind of feel like that's Jeff Skinner in a way, isn't it?
I think that's a hell of a pull. And I agree with you because you look at the record books for the Buffalo Bills and he's up near the top and in the top 10 in a lot of things. Jeff Skinner is going to be very similar around some big time names. Like you mentioned, Pat LaFontaine, right up there with one of the legendary Buffalo Sabres. And you might not think of Jeff Skinner that way. You might not think of Aaron Schobel that way, but they put up numbers in their time with Buffalo. And I think we did a draft about like underrated Buffalo Bills or Buffalo players a few years ago. And I'm pretty sure I named Aaron Schobel in one of them because I was looking at the stats. I was like, don't quote me on this. I think he's number 2 on the Buffalo Bills in sacks behind Bruce. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's not. I think he's got like 90 or 95 career sacks. And I'm pretty sure he's at least in the top 3, if not top 2.
Yeah, I think he is too, actually. Now that you're saying that, I think he is. Well, I'll tell you from if the Sabres organizational history is any indication, Jeff Skinner is about to end a 1,000-game drought because former Sabres go on elsewhere and they literally win Stanley Cups. So let me ask you this. Stanley Cups, I almost said World Series. Stanley Cup's over. Were you rooting for Edmonton? Were you rooting for Florida? Who were you rooting for in that series? Did you have a horse in the race?
I honestly didn't really care, but if I was leaning towards a team, I think I was leaning towards Florida just because I was a fan of Sam Reinhart. I think he was criticized the wrong way when he was here. And I think him putting up the 50 some odd goal season in Florida proved that he's a hell of a hockey player and he's about to get paid as one. So I think I was leaning more towards Florida just for that reason, but seeing McDavid hoist the cup, I think that would also been pretty cool. But I think the way it ended in a 2-1 victory with Sam Reinhart getting a game winner was just that extra knife in the side of Buffalo Sabres that I think is just a cherry on top of what has been a miserable 13 years.
I hate saying it's old Buffalo, but it's old Buffalo, ain't it, man? And look, a lot of Buffalo fans did not want Edmonton to win because their coach Knobloch really kind of bashed the Bills for going to 4 straight Super Bowls and losing. I was like, I don't give a shit. That is nothing to me compared to having to hear another former Sabres captain or alternate captain or great player and core player goes and wins a Stanley Cup. I mean, come on, dude. It's undeniable at this point. This is 3 of them now. Ryan O'Reilly leaves, goes to the Blues, wins a cup. Conn Smythe winner. Jack Eichel goes to Vegas, wins a cup. Sam Reinhart goes to Florida. By the way, becomes a 50-goal scorer this year. Scores literally the game-winning goal in Game 7. Wins the Stanley Cup. Kyle Okposo, who came in with the expectations, didn't work out, but a mainstay here, a core player, a leader on this team, goes to Florida a couple months later. He wins a Stanley Cup. That's why I said, if Jeff Skinner, you mentioned Colorado as a possible landing point. If Jeff Skinner and Casey Middlestat are both on Colorado, you may as well give them the Stanley Cup right now.
Go bet
for
some
next
futures.
year. And by the way, as you were talking, because I just can't help myself, when you give me a little bit of a teaser, I got to go research it. Aaron Schobel is indeed second all time on the Bills sack list. He had 78, obviously way behind Bruce Smith, who had 171. Quick little trivia though before we move on. I would not have guessed this. You know who's third?
Is it Mario Williams?
No, Mario Williams is actually not even in the top 6.
Oh crap. I have no
It's
idea then.
Bruce, it's Schobel, it's Phil Hansen.
Huh.
Phil Hansen is third all times in sacks with 61. And Jerry Hughes is fourth with 53. And then round out the top 5 is Biscuit, Cornelius Bennett with 52 and a half. Pretty wild. Yeah, I would have thought Mario for sure. I mean, he had 3 double-digit sack seasons for the Bills. One last thing before we get to break, and then I want to do our buy or sell. This really, truly, legitimately, it has to be a make or break summer for Kevin Adams. He's got to be 100% on the spot. I mean, you trade Jack Eichel, you kind of had to do that. You trade Sam Reinhart. You've made a lot of decisions. You paid out a lot of money to a very young core. Some might say some of that money might have been premature for some of those players. You're buying out Jeff Skinner right now. You've had a lot of top picks in the draft. You got a really deep prospect pool. You have been through multiple coaches. You, at least to some extent, well, I don't know, how much pull he had in making a decision to hire Lindy Ruff, or if that's a Pagula decision, but regardless, his name's on that. He's the general manager. Draft coming up, a summer, $31 million in salary cap, a team that 2 years ago was just 2 points away from making the playoffs. It took a step back last year to replace the coach. There's kind of like, not that he's out there blaming anyone else, because he's not, but even if he wanted to, like, he's run out of, fingering your fingers to be able to point at other people. It's kind of like he's got to put this team together right this summer, or he might be the next one to be a former Buffalo Sabre employee.
Yeah, like you said, his fingerprints and his signatures are all over this team now. There's no more blame in the prior regime, because this is all him. He's the one that signed all these big time dollars and extensions to all these young players, hoping that they would pan out. And it's still possible that this plan works. And I was still in favor of doing what you're doing, because I think that's how you get long-term success, as long as you're paying the right players. It's definitely a make or break season. And we said last year it was playoffs or bust, and they busted, and Granato paid the price for it. If they don't make playoffs this year, and if for some reason they even regress this year, you got to be looking at the general manager and just going, okay, this is you've gotten plenty of time. We've given you all the resources. We've given you plenty of time. We haven't put you on the short stick here like we did a few prior GMs. Like Tim Murray, I think they hooked him a bit too soon. I wanted to see exactly what he did there, but I think this is a season where his job is on the line, and there can be times where that works to their benefit and it can get them out of the drought.
Yeah.
But doing so this offseason with all that cap space, if it fails, it could set this franchise back even further if he screws up, and then they're stuck with really bad contracts that he signed trying to break this drought and save his job.
When the Bills were in the drought for all those years, they would have to try to come up with creative ways to like market the team and make fans still care. And right now, I feel like the Sabres, it felt like they had almost exhausted all their options, but then they pull a rabbit out of the hat and they bring back Lindy Ruff. That's got fans excited again, understandably and deservedly so. But that shit don't work out. What other tricks you got left up your sleeve with this organization? It's going to be yet another house cleaning. Oh, I just can't fathom the thought of it. But anyway, it's going to be interesting for sure, because Jeff Skinner, he might not even be a Sabre by the time some people at least are listening to this. We'll see how that plays out. But you got the draft on Friday. Lots of rumors that the Sabres could trade that as part of a package for a veteran. Even if they don't, you got to expect a trade or two. It's coming down to shoot. Free agency's coming. It's going to be a pretty wild time to follow the Sabres. But anyway, we'll take a real quick break, come back on the other side, and we're going to get into some buy and sell, some Bills stuff, and a couple more Sabres things as well. All All right, I'm back with PK from the Buffalo Sports Collective. We just spent the first half of the show talking about Jeff Skinner, the Buffalo Sabres, Kevin Adams, all the pressure in the world on Kevin, deservedly so. We're going to do a buy or sell segment. I'm just going to read off some statements to you, some takes, whatever you want to call them, and we're going to know if PK is buying it or selling it. Let's kick it off with the Buffalo Bills, and I'll start with I don't think this is an easy one. Von Miller is going to lead the Buffalo Bills in sacks in 2024.
I'm a sell. And I just don't think he is going to play enough to be able to build up those sacks. And I think he's going to be a situational pass rusher when we know it's passing down. So the opportunities are going to be there to rack up those sacks. And I know not even flash, but I think his best games were in the playoffs last year. So he was coming on strong, but he's another year older. I think they brought back AJ Epinesa for a reason. I think him and Rousseau are going to be the anchors on the defensive end. And maybe this is I think AJ Epinesa is going to lead the team in sacks this year. I just got a weird gut feeling that it's going to be him. And I think I'll give Von a third. I think he can get up to the possibly 8.5, maybe 9 sacks, but I think you can get Rousseau up to, 10 and maybe AJ Epinesa around 12. That would be my guess, because I just don't see it. I'm hoping for it because, that's, even with the pay cut, that's still a lot of money for Von Miller, but I'm going to sell this one. I'm not going to push my money towards that one.
I'll tell you this, a little bit of a teaser for my show with John Scott tomorrow, which is already in the can. We taped it right before actually we're doing this show right now. And we were having a thought discussion about the defensive end position. And at the end of that conversation, we both kind of realized Greg Rousseau might be one of the 3 most important players on the Buffalo Bills this season. Absolutely in the top 5. I mean, look, as long as Josh Allen is breathing and wearing a Bills uniform, he'll be the most important player, of course. But Greg Rousseau has got to step up. You lose Leonard Floyd, it is 10.5 sacks, even though he only had 1 sack in his final 8 games last year, including the playoffs. But you lose him, you don't make any impactful free agent signing, unless I'm wrong and Dwayne Smoot turns out to be much more than I think he's going to be. You didn't use a draft pick at the position until the 5th round. Javon Solomon is almost certainly going to be a developmental prospect type. You can't expect much from him his rookie year. And with John AJ Epinesa, I agree. I think opportunity is what he has lacked the most to play more percentage of snaps and if he can stay healthy. I think he's had, 6.5 sacks each of his last 2 years. So he can ramp that up. But anyway, the topic was Von Miller leading the team. And I'm with you, man. 35 years old. Even though he looked better at the end of last season, and even though he's coming into this season supposedly fully healthy and all the way back, that's tough. That is tough. I will say, though, PK, I mean, we saw Trey White come back a couple years ago too early, and he looked like shit. And then the next summer for the first, camp, preseason, first month of the season, he looked great. And then he got hurt again, unfortunately. And then we saw Vaughn last year, kind of the same deal. He came back too early and he looked like shit, but now he's healthy. So if you want to be optimistic, sure, that'd be nice. But 5, 6, 7 sacks maybe you get from Von Miller situationally. I think realistically, that's about the most. So over clear, though, you said AJ Epinesa is your pick, though.
That's my pick to lead the team, yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you're wrong because I really need it to be Greg Rousseau. If Greg Rousseau is going to get a big fat contract, it better be Greg Rousseau. More on that.
I hope I'm wrong too. I gotta be wrong. I think I gotta be wrong here.
Next question here, and this is kind of a 2-parter, so I suppose it could be 2 answers. Dalton Kincaid, top 5 NFL among tight ends in catches and yards.
I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I am all in on this one. I think this is another one, like you said, Rousseau, he has to be. Dalton Kincaid has to be this tight end because I know we've already talked to death about the wide receiver room and their plan going forward with the receivers. I think Dalton Kincaid's the most important one in the receiving room to take that next step. And I liked him last year, and I think there's a lot more to be desired. And I think you're kind of hoping that he takes that, what Sam Laporta was last year. And I think you're hoping that that is what Dalton Kincaid can be this year. I mean, he was 10th last year with out of tight ends with 673 yards. He was behind Kittle, Kelsey, Ingram, Hawkinson, Laporta, Njoku, McBride, Ferguson, and Kmet. I think Laporta, Kelsey, Ingram, and McBride are ahead of them, but I think there's room for him in that top 5. Hawkinson's not going to be playing much. I think you got Kittle, who's got the weapons around him. They just drafted another rookie wide receiver out there, and you're going full time with Brock Purdy. Finally went over 1,000 yards, I think, for the first time since 2019. Njoku, he's got Deshaun Watson back, and those two did not connect well. And Ferguson, who's out in Dallas, and even Kmet with more weapons with Allen and the rookie. Why am I blanking? Odunze out in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was blanking too for a second. I'm like, hold on, yeah, Rome Odunze. Yeah.
I couldn't remember his name, but we're actually in the middle of a dynasty football draft. That's why all these names are in the top of my head. But for the catches, I think he was tied for 7th with tight ends. He was tied with Cole Kmet with 773. I think that's going to get closer to the 85-90, which I think will sneak him into the top 5. I mean, Ingram was in front of him. He led the tight end room. Hawkinson, who's going to be missing the beginning of the season. You got Kelsey, Laporta, Njoku, and McBride. I think he's jumping ahead of the same guys, and I think it's the same 4 that are ahead of him, and I think he can sneak in the top 5 for both. So if I was a betting man, I'm all in on yards and catches and for top 5 and tight ends in the league.
I think I would buy as well, cautiously. Like I would make that bet if you force me to make the bet. I would buy, but I wouldn't feel great. I wouldn't feel great only because you just named a whole shitload of them. There's a lot of really good tight ends the NFL for sure. Getting to, the top 5 in receiving yards. So he had 673 last year. He'd have to get to 889 based on last year's stats. That's where Laporta was 5th overall. I could totally see him being in the top 5 in catches among tight ends. Yards might be a little bit tougher because I think the Bills are going to have that kind of committee type. And by the way, you one of the tight ends you mentioned that would benefit your case, I think personally, just my opinion, is Travis Kelce. A year older. He's kind of one of those, let me know when the season matters. That's at true. That point of his career, you know what I mean? And that's when he steps his game up like he did last year in the playoffs, because he looked kind of washed up last year, which is nuts because he still had 93 catches for 984 yards last year. And I'm calling this boy washed up, man. I mean, what are you kidding me? But you saw what he did in the playoffs. It's crazy. But I will say, I do think Dalton Kincaid, which might have been a better question, or maybe a little bit easier though, is I think he's going to lead the Bills in catches, and I think he might lead the Bills in yards as well.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah, he's going to be that part of that one consistent part of that offense. The receivers, we don't know. We know Samuel and Shakir should have pretty well-defined roles, but after that, who the hell knows about Keon Coleman or Mac Hollins or MVS or Chase Claypool if he's even around after a week or two of camp. Yeah, I'm with you, but I'm going to give a much more cautious buy on those. All right, next one here. The Buffalo Bills, we mentioned this guy just a few minutes ago. The Buffalo Bills will extend either Gregory Rousseau or Spencer Brown before the season starts.
If you would have put the word "and" instead of "or," I would have been selling. But because you put "or," I'm buying this one, and I think it's going to be Spencer Brown. And he proved me wrong big time last year, coming off the injury plagued and poor performance season 2 seasons ago. I think he's your long-term right tackle. And while you might not be saving a bunch of money this year because he's only making like 1.1 or something like that on the cap, I think you can get him in and locked in that right tackle position, and locking him up long-term on that offensive line, I think is really important. I think Gregory Rousseau, I think is a wait and see. And I think they're more cautiously optimistic that he can make that jump. Like you said, he's one of the most important players on this team that needs to step up and needs to earn that draft pedigree of being a late first round pick. I think between the two, it's going to be Spencer Brown. I think you're going to see an extension from one of these two guys. I'm leaning at Spencer Brown, but because you put the word "or," I'm pushing my chips in the center of the table because I get one or the other and I win.
You know what? It'll sound like a broken record here, a copycat. I'll buy as well. Look, with Greg Rizzo right now, I want to see more. I want to see a guy, because if you're extending him, that means you're giving him big money. And this is a guy who has not had more than 8 sacks in a season right now, going into his 4th year. I think he only had 5 sacks last year. Lots of potential. I think his floor is a really solid defensive end, but I need to see that his ceiling is borderline, at least kind of elite, or at least really, really, really good defensive end. And we haven't seen that ceiling. We've just seen a nice, safe guy sets the edge, gets after the quarterback, makes some nice plays. I'm not hating. I like Greg Rizzo. I'd like to see him earn a long-term extension. I'm not trying to see the Bills lose him. So that's not what I'm saying. But with Spencer Brown, I look at it this way too. A little bit of a calculated risk if you were to extend him now, because last year he was really good. The year before that, he kind of sucked, but he was hurt. Brandon Beane was defending him to the end of the earth 2 off seasons ago, talking about the back and the injuries. And kudos to Brandon Beane, because he was it looks like he was right, because Spencer Brown bounced back last year. I thought he was really solid. If you sign him an extension now, maybe you get him 12 to 14 million a year. If he goes out and he has a year like he did last year, he's probably in this crazy ass market with the cap going up. He's probably getting $16 to $19 million somewhere in the open market. One of those contracts you're like, holy shit, this guy just got a shitload of money and somebody overpaid. Ha 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 ha. Meanwhile, you're stuck with no right tackle. So if you can get him for 12 to 13 now, as opposed to maybe 16 to 19 in a year, you do it. But if last year was a little bit of an anomaly and he's more like the player that he was 2 years ago, you know what it is. You know what it's like with the Bills, or Sabres. They give out these shitty contracts. You get stuck with them, and you end up having to make kind of drastic moves. But I'm going to buy as well, and I also agree with you. I do think of the two, I would extend Spencer Brown. I think Rizzo's a safer player, but I think Spencer Brown's got I think with the market, you're going to get him at a better price. So
agreed. Yep. That's a calculated risk.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Next one here. The Buffalo Bills are making at least one trade before week 1. And let me clarify. That could be Brandon Ayuk. That could be a 3rd string center from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or something. But I'm telling you, from the time we record this until week 1, Brandon Beane is trading with somebody for someone. Or something.
This has been the easiest. Wait, I got to clarify first. Is it to bring in a player or ship a player out for a piece?
It could be anything.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
It could be a trade. Whether he could trade a 7th round pick for a player. He can trade a player for a 7th round pick. It could be anything, or a big trade. It could be whatever. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. This is the easiest buy for me then, because we all know Brandon Beane before cap deadline, he's going to trade one of his offensive linemen for an upgrade in the 7th round or something like that. He's going to trade the excess pieces that he has to another team. What is it? Daryl Johnson that he traded to Carolina years ago for a 7th round pick. He typically does this. Ryan Bates, he's going to make some type of deal before week 1. I think this is the safest buy you can possibly make, because Brandon Beane loves to wheel and deal. If there's a player that he knows he can't keep, he would lose on the practice squad, and there's somebody out there that could use his services on the 53, he'll go out there, ship him out for a 7th round pick. It's a guaranteed locked in. This is the easiest buy of all these questions.
And there's been other ones too. He traded Wyatt Teller, which turns out that was a shitty trade, but he traded him. Last year he traded Boogie Basham, which turned out to be a pretty good trade, because Boogie Basham did nothing with the Giants and wasn't really doing anything with the Bills either. Yeah, I'll buy it based on the language that I presented to you. I couldn't go back once I said that, because he will trade something small or a guy he's not going to keep. Which, by the way, I'm trying to think on this roster, just thinking out loud here, I don't think there's a Boogie Basham on the team this year. Like a player.
I was looking too. I was trying to find an example.
I wanted to. Well, You know who might be this year's Boogie Basham? Damar Hamlin, maybe. I mean, they're pretty. They got Edwards. They got Rapp.
Yeah,
They
they're
got
stacked right
they got who am I thinking of? Cole Bishop, the rookie. They they got Cam Lewis. They brought back. I think D Delaney. They signed. See Damar Hamlin. He's a guy who's probably not making this roster. Like Boogie might not have made the roster last year. So maybe Damar Hamlin could be that guy that they trade for maybe a pick instead of cutting him and getting nothing. Remember, you heard that first here, unless I'm wrong, and you never heard it. I wanted to say Kyrie Elam, but here's the deal. Who the hell's going to be the corner after the two starters? Right? Kyrie Elam's their third corner right now. I would say if they're going to make a trade for an actual player who could come in and help this team instead of shipping someone out for a late pick, corner could be a possibility. Or maybe guard. Right now they got David Edwards and Leal Collins. Kind of, even though they said Leal Collins was going to play tackle, but I think he's going to ultimately, there's no one to push David Edwards. So maybe they trade for a guard or something at some point. But yeah, this is an easy guy.
I can't see them make an Ayuk deal. That would be lovely, and I would support that. But yeah, I think if they're going to make some type of deal to bring in a player, I think you hit the two positions. It's probably corner or guard, just because of they're lighter in those two positions, and Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott like to have that depth and the options and the choices when you go to camp.
Yeah, I put out a tweet on Wednesday too after the money. They were talking about Skinner's money, $7.5 million, 31 in cap space. It's like, can they use that money to go trade for Brandon Ayuk? Because I would do that in a second there.
Same
two
ownership,
more Bills.
You should be allowed, right?
Two more Bills ones here. Micah Hyde will play for the Bills sometime this season.
At this moment, I am a sell, and this is on pure hope that if he does, it's going to be late in the season for a playoff run. But I am leaning on the side of optimism here. I think Cole Bishop can step up into that role in the second half of the season. In the middle of the season, I think they're going to start giving him more responsibilities and see if he can run with it. And I think he's going to be able to, and I think he's going to fill in nicely back there and be that go-to guy that Sean McDermott can rely on, that he could with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. And I think if you get that from Cole Bishop, I think it's less priority to try to go out and entice Micah Hyde to come back, because you have a guy that's going to be growing in this spot. And this is a year where I think where expectations are lower. Super Bowl is not in the conversations for a lot of people. So I think if you're able to take a Cole Bishop second half of the season, let him make those small mistakes and learn from them and correct them in games, I think that is your best outcome. So leaning on the side of optimism, I'm going to sell this one.
I would say sell as well. And I would also say if you're a Bills fan, the temptation might be to want to see Micah Hyde play again. But if you're rooting for the Bills to do well, I would sell as well, because if Micah Hyde is back, that means something went wrong. Yep. Whether it's Mike Edwards most likely would be Mike Edwards, that free safety. He's not working out, or even worse, he got hurt. There's just injuries at that position. So now you're thin. And I would say this too. Sean McDermott loves Micah Hyde. There's no question about that. But Sean McDermott, more than anything else, wants to win. He wants the best football team. So does Brandon Beane. And I feel like if they thought right now that Micah Hyde gave them the best chance to win as a starting free safety, they would find a way to sign him. You know what I'm saying? Like, you wouldn't wait for an injury at camp or just take off. Von Miller's not taking off OTAs. Deion Dawkins is not taking off training camp. Just let him sit out camp and just come to week one. It could play out that way, but I don't think that's ideal for the Bills. And I think if they thought of Micah Hyde at this point as a safety that they really coveted, they would already sign him. Like, he'd go to camp and he'd be their starter. So the fact that he's not tells me that they think, at least right now, Mike Edwards is better.
Yeah, especially with his voice in the locker room, with that
Sure.
completely changed over safety room. His voice in that locker room in training camp would have been immense for Sean McDermott to be able to, hey, I can't pay this much attention to this room. I have Micah to do it. So I completely agree. If there was any doubt or any thought that Mike Hyde could be a better player than what is there, I think he'd be on the roster right now.
For sure. All right, last Buffalo Bills one here. And to me, this is going to be an interesting one. There's not a lot of intriguing storylines right now going into training camp. There'll be a couple positional battles. Like you might see Taylor Rapp versus Cole Bishop at starting strong safety. You're going to see a couple depth battles. The wide receiver and back half is going to be fun to watch. But to me, maybe the most interesting development that we're still waiting to find out is going to be who's calling the plays on defense. Sean McDermott has said multiple times, going back a couple months now, that was going to be a determination that was made during training camp. Is it going to be him again, or is it going to be the guy elevated to defensive coordinator, Bobby Babich? So my statement is this: Bobby Babich calling defensive plays for the Bills in 2024.
I'm buying it. I'm buying this one, and I think it has a lot to do with McDermott. We all saw last year what Sean McDermott was able to do as defensive coordinator and the magic he was able to pull out with all the injuries back there. I don't think there's anything else for him to prove that he needs to be that defensive coordinator. I think any doubt that he's not a good defensive coordinator, that he doesn't have his hands all over this defense, is put to rest with what he was able to do last year. I think this is another one where it's me hoping that it's Bobby Babich making those calls, because it frees up Sean McDermott to look elsewhere and not dedicate all of his time, especially in practice. This is kind of like a behind the scenes type of thing where he's going to be able to look at all the players and not just focus on the calls on defense and making sure that it's being relayed, that he's got a guy that can do it. Now, this is not me saying that there could be games where he doesn't go to Bobby Babich and go, hey, I'm making the calls here at the final 2 minutes. You can learn on the fly here as me. I'm making these final calls on this final drive. I still think that could be possible, but for the vast majority of the season, I'm giving the nod to Bobby Babich being the play caller for the defensive side of the ball.
I think this is, of the ones we've done or that we've covered, I think this is the hardest one. Almost feels like a coin flip to me. And this is also going to be the first one where I think we disagree. We have a different answer. I'm going to sell. I think at the end of the day, Sean McDermott is a control freak. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but Sean wants to control as much as he humanly can. The fact that he had success, like what you outlined last season, kind of leads me to think that and the fact that he elevated within instead of bringing someone from the outside, somebody who's maybe a better known candidate. I love Bobby Babich. I'm really high on that. I think Bobby Babich might be a head coach in the next 3 years. I want to put that out there, but Sean McDermott wants to control as much shit as possible. I think he controlled a lot more of that defense when Leslie Frazier was defensive coordinator than a lot of people realize. Part of the reason why Leslie Frazier relatively abruptly ended up leaving this organization. Bobby Babich may eventually call plays, but I don't think it's going to be this year. I can see a scenario where Sean went to him and said, all right, you're my new defensive coordinator. Learn from me. I'm going to call the plays this year, and then you could take over. But like I said, I think this is the hardest one, and I could easily be wrong. That's my thought process right now. I feel like if it was going to be Bobby Babich and I'm not saying he doesn't have confidence in him, so I need to be careful on how I word this. If he was fully confident that Bobby Babich can handle play calling duties, I feel like he would have already said that. But you can look at it the other way. If maybe he wants to see how Bobby Babich looks in camp and maybe even the preseason before making that determination. Got a quarter so I can flip it?
Not on me. I've pushed all my chips in, so I don't have any money left. But yeah, I think it could also be them waiting for training camp, because it truly could be undecided right now. It could be them going to Terrell Bernard, who I believe is going to be relaying the calls on the field, who he prefers in his ear as well. It could be as simple as that, where he's getting the opinions of the defensive players out on the field of, hey, do you like Sean making these calls, or do you like Bobby making these calls? That could be more input that he would need. Not that would be the determining factor, but it could be more factors into him making that decision of, hey, do the players like, the way Bobby's making these play calls, or do they like the way I'm making these play calls? But what you said about the control freak, yeah, I have a tad bit of that in me with the podcast we run, where it's like I'm always on the other two's case of, hey, when's this getting done? How's this doing?
Yeah.
And all my hands everywhere, where I trust them, but I always like to be in the middle of it. So I have a tad bit of that, but yeah, I can see your side where it's just Sean going like, I'm the man. I called this defense last year, and I trust myself to, not that he doesn't trust Bobby Babich, but if anybody's going to be making those game time decision calls, I want to be the one that does it.
Maybe being a podcaster is like a control freak kind of thing. I'm kind of the same way, man. I got a couple of guests that are routinely on every week. My man Joe from Queens, he's always suggesting stuff to me, and some of it's kind of wild and out there. And I'm like, no, I don't control it. And then he gets mad at me. He's not wrong, because I am a control freak. But
like Phil would say the same thing for me too. So
yeah,
you're not alone there.
if you force me to make, I would pass on that bet. By the way, like I wouldn't want to make that bet because I do think it could go either way, truly. But if I'm forced to make the bet, I'm saying it's going to be Sean. A couple of hockey ones, and we're going to bounce out. Connor McDavid deserved the Conn Smythe Trophy, even though the Edmonton Oilers lost in the Stanley Cup Finals.
This one to me is the toughest one.
Yeah.
If I had to make a decision and I can't sit on the sidelines, I'll buy it. Yes, he was missing from games 6 and 7. Like, he was pretty much non-existent. I think Florida did a very good job of bottling him up, especially in game 7. I mean, he played a ton and his legs were beat, but being the world-class player he is, he needs to step up more in that game deciding game. Barkov would be the one that I would pick. I think I always screw up his name. Bobrovsky. I think he kind of lost it. I think he was the leading horse going into the finals, and I think he kind of lost it in the games that they lost in the finals. Mm-hmm. But I look at it like this. If Connor McDavid was not on the Edmonton Oilers, there's no chance in hell they're in a game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. If Barkov's not on the team, I still think they make the finals because they're that talented. And that's no discrediting what Barkov is. I just think they are built better and built better for the playoffs. Florida is than Edmonton is, but it's tough. If he just didn't show up in game 7, like he 2 shots, maybe 3 shots. And I know he came close on that game tying one that just missed the net on that tip, but I need more from him, but I would have to buy just because he was up there with Wayne Gretzky's type of records. It's hard to ignore that type of fact.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's worth stating that the Conn Smythe is a playoff MVP. It's not a finals MVP. So based on that, yeah, but man, it's hard. Only because it's hard for me to vote for somebody that lost.
Yep.
To win an MVP award. It's really hard. And to your point, he didn't do himself any favors in game 6 or 7 of the Stanley Cup either. So actually, I'm changing my mind on the fly. Maybe I'll go with Barkov too, just because you can't go scoreless in game 6 and 7 of the Stanley Cup, and you can't have your team lose and still be the Conn Smythe winner. So I changed my mind on the fly. Now I'm selling that. All right, last 2 here. The Buffalo Sabres, we talked about it. Friday night, NHL draft. The Sabres are on the clock right now anyway, with the 11th pick. The Buffalo Sabres are going to trade that pick Friday night.
We talked about this on the episode that aired today for us. There's a difference between what I want them to do and what I expect them to do. And because of what I expect them to do, I am selling this. And I'm already hearing what Kevin Adams is going to say at the press conference that, hey, we had a lot of talk out there. There were a lot of people interested in this pick, but nobody met our demands. And it's never a bad thing to add another talented prospect to our deep, talented prospect pool. Yeah. That's exactly what he's going to be saying. And I'm going to bash my head through my living room TV and just cry because it's stupid that this team, who is already one of the top teams in prospect talent, adds another piece, and it continues to not add pieces to the NHL product. I want to be proven wrong. I hope I lose all my money on this one, but I'm selling it. I think they're keeping on the 11th overall pick. I don't think they're going to move it. I think they're just going to draft the best prospect on the board.
I'm thinking they're going to sell it as well. And the biggest reason is just odds. There's a lot better chance that they're going to take the pick than not take the pick. I could also see them taking the pick, and maybe they trade Rosine or somebody like that as part of a package. They trade some of the young core that they got right now and use that 11th pick to replenish it. Not saying that's what I want. I'm saying that's what the odds are. I would like to see them make the trade. I'd like to see them trade out of that along with whoever else they got to get whatever else that they're looking for. But yeah, for sure. The odds favor them making the pick. And like I said, maybe they trade some of the young prospects in the organization. Quick little sidebar too, though, by the way. The NHL draft, 4 days after the Stanley Cup. It is stupid to you. I was like, man, I haven't watched much NHL playoffs kind of in years. I lose interest for whatever reason once the Sabres are bounced, which is usually February or sooner. But this year I kind of was into it, and I'm a little bit fatigued from I watched especially the conference finals in the cup, and it's like, what the fuck, man? Like just a couple days ago. Now the draft is Friday night. I'm kind of pointing this as a slanted question. Isn't this stupid?
100%.
No?
Draft is Friday and Saturday, and I think free agency opens on Monday. And that's less. It's a week from them crowning the champion. I know if it would have finished in 4 games, it would have been a different story. The season's too long. Like it needs to end like the first weekend in June. That's about when hockey should end. It shouldn't be going to the middle of summer. And I know that's more up here than down there, but still, I think less preseason games. There's no need to have 6 preseason games because half the players don't play in it. And it's not like the NFL where you're looking to see, hey, these players are going to get cut. 90% of them go back to the organization's farm team or go back to college or to juniors. I think they need more back-to-backs and less travel days in the playoffs. What was it? Like 2 or 3 travel days in the finals? It's stupid. This season needs to be trimmed by at least 2 or 3 weeks. And I think the biggest way to do that is just cut down to 2 or 3 preseason games.
Yeah, for sure. It's too much, man. I guess if you're a real true hockey fanatic, you kind of love it because there's no break. I mean, if you're a content creator or like I said, a big fan, you got the draft, and then as soon as that's over and you spend some time reading up, because it's not like the NFL where you do all these mock drafts and you know a lot of these prospects. The average hockey fan don't know more than the first couple prospects. So you're going to be spending all weekend just trying to familiarize yourself. Who the hell did the Sabres draft? And by the time you do that, it's going to be free agency. So who the hell knows? Yeah, it is crazy. All right, last one here. I'm going to preface this by saying you and I both reserve the right to change our minds approximately 900 times between now and October when the season starts. But as of right now, buy or sell, Lindy Ruff will end the Buffalo Sabres 13-year drought.
I saved a little Kool-Aid from the Dalton Kincaid one. I'm drinking it. I think, do I know it's this year? I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think Lindy Ruff.
Let me rephrase it then. Hold on, PK. I'm cheating. I'm gonna change the game.
Oh, crap.
He's ending the drought this year. May or may not.
Good. Kool-Aid's good. I'll drink it. He'll end it. He'll end it. It's more for my own sanity, for my own well-being. I was still a teenager the last time the Sabres were in the playoffs. 32 now. So yeah, it's been a while. He's won everywhere he's gone, though. And yes, it doesn't end well. And I think that he got the short end of the stick with the Devils because they didn't add a goalie. And, the irony, they add a goalie as soon as they fire him. But I think he breaks this drought. And I think to add another, I guess I'll buy even more into this. I think once he breaks the drought and it's pretty much mission accomplished for him, I think he transitions out of the head coaching role, goes upstairs into the front office in some type of capacity, and they hire a coach that I personally believe that they believe can get the job done. I don't think they believe that Lindy Ruff can get them the Stanley Cup. I don't believe that for 1 second, because I don't believe that Lindy Ruff is a coach that can get this team, regardless of how many years it takes, to win that end goal. But he is sure as a hell of a coach that can get them to the playoffs and break this drought. And for all of Buffalo, please be right. Please, for sanity's sake, this is the worst playoff drought in the history of sports right now, because it should be so 24 teams made it the COVID year, and the Sabres were not one of them and extended the drought even more. That's how bad of a drought this is. He has to break it this year.
I'm gonna buy I'm not going to buy because I have faith in this organization. I think this organizationally is an absolute disgrace.
Agreed.
And that has not changed. I'm going to buy, well, two reasons. Number one, the positive thing I'll say is I do think Lindy Ruff is a winner. Lindy Ruff might not be the guy to get you over the hump, but Lindy Ruff's going to get your ass into the playoffs.
Yep.
Going to the playoffs is going to feel like winning the Stanley Cup if you're a Buffalo Sabres fan. I think he's the guy who's going to get you that 7 to 9 points throughout the course of a regular season that maybe Don Granato's not going to get you. That might be the difference there. So I like Lindy Ruff for that. I think he's going to make this team more accountable. I think they're going to play a little bit of a different brand of hockey, a little more two-way, play with more fire in their belly, play with more self-accountability. But the bigger reason why is goddamn gravity. The laws of gravity, dude. 13 goddamn years. You got to be one of the best 8 teams in your conference sooner or later at some point. And between Lindy Ruff and just the fact that, man, at some point you got to be one of the best 8 teams in your conference. I'm going to buy with the least amount of faith in a buy ever. Just, it's frustrating. Look, let's hope for some excitement this coming tomorrow, the next day, the next week or so. Something to feel confident in with this team. If Lindy Ruff is the thing that you're most confident in on this hockey team, that's not good enough.
Yeah, that polish that you're shining with Lindy Ruff only lasts so long. When you see all these other teams making deals and adding new players and adding new shiny pieces, it's not going to last long. A head coach bringing in, regardless of who it is, especially Lindy Ruff, it's not going to last long to a well-educated fan base like the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and that's going to do it for this episode. Which, by the way, if you're not following PK on Twitter, make sure you are at PK_BSC. Check out Buffalo Sports Collective. All right, man. So we got some stuff that's definitely going to be cooking with the Sabres, and we got Bill's training camp coming up just in a matter of weeks. So I look forward to having you back on soon, and we'll kind of I feel like we'll finally have some like new and exciting stuff to talk about.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. If there's not, it's going to be bad.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching and for listening. And like I said, I got John Scott on the show with me tomorrow from Imperial Pizza. Talk to you then.